I just want to go home. The master of ancient secrets, the traveler who fools fate, the tourist of hell, the creator of mystical runes, and the ultimate guide of the past. Dante and Ashborne. On that day, the Eastern Taoist who believed in materialism suddenly realized that he had finally gained a sense of mysticism after studying for more than 20 years. However, it is in a mysterious and eerie Western world. Guns and magic, machinery and transcendence, talismans and alchemy, the Great Six Ren and astrology. Opening his eyes to see this eerie world, he passively embarked on a journey full of danger. Penetrating the unknown mist, the ancient gods whispered in their ears, and Sanchi murmured in the distance. My name is Dante, and I will compose the divine song of this world. But before that, I want to solve the trouble caused by these 121 ex-girlfriends first. Keywords of the novel. I am a Taoist in the extraordinary world without pop-ups. I am a Taoist in the extraordinary world. Download the complete set of TXT, and read the latest chapter of I Am a Taoist in the Extraordinary World. Chapter 1. Blood Eyes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Blood Eyes. When Su Nuo opened his eyes, the entrance was filled with blood stains. The sudden tearing pain of all four limbs and bones, coupled with occasional throbbing pain in the back of the head, seemed to have been coldly placed on an iron bed covered in thorns and nails, suffering from inhumane and cruel punishment. I am. The waves of dizziness and pain in the brain make it difficult for people to maintain clear thinking. He tried very hard to see the surrounding environment, but could only see blood-red mottled light and shadow, as if his eyes were covered with a thick layer of gauze. Pain. It hurt so much. He tried to make some movement, but the tearing sensation that came from his limbs instantly shattered all his strength in less than a second. When this huge pain struck, dense beads of sweat instantly covered the forehead, and sweat flowed smoothly. Just a few drops fell on the eye sockets, making the blood-red spots slightly visible, but still unable to see anything clearly. Su Nuo is trying hard. He wants to get up, turn his head, and tear open the gauze that covers his eyes. The intense pain made it impossible for him to move at all, as if he had lost all control over his body. However, the pain seemed to help clear consciousness. Under his persistent struggles, although the blood-red spots in front of him were still unable to see anything, the dizziness in his brain was gradually being suppressed by the intense pain in his body. This finally allowed him to start thinking about what had happened while in pain. I returned home after work last night, cooking, washing, lying in bed, and brushing my phone as usual. During this period, I also had a phone call with my master who raised me. He continued to nag me, saying that even if I go down the mountain, I should not forget to study my homework. And as always, I also joked with my master about believing in science and avoiding superstition. As a new youth of the 21st century, Su Nuo considers himself a materialist. Even though he is a registered Taoist, he still has a Taoist title. Just as he was trying to slowly clear the current situation by tracing back his memories, the sudden and piercing pain in the back of his brain almost made him lose consciousness in an instant. Then, memory fragments suddenly jumped out, like a surging tide flooding his mind and flowing rapidly. Dante Ashborne, from the city of Nolan in the province of Lantis in the Western Hemisphere. I graduated from the Department of Sociology at Yellowton University 2 years ago and currently operate a detective agency with average efficiency. My biological father passed away early, and my mother remarried a mid-level military officer from the Federal 7th Guard. Later, she passed away due to illness and left behind a half-brother. My stepfather died 3 years ago in an assassination attempt against a high-ranking federal official, leaving the two brothers to rely on each other, Heavenly Shaw twin stars. Su Nuo forced himself to endure the severe pain in the back of his head and muttered subconsciously between dizziness and wakefulness. Dante, Ashborne, and his younger brother are well fated. Wait a minute. Why does this person's memory come to my mind, and what is the Federation? After realizing something, Su Nuo gritted his teeth and tried to control his body in an attempt to stand up. The intense pain all over his body made him sweat profusely, and the mottled blood red in front of him, accompanied by the dripping of sweat beads, gradually faded, although it was still as blurry as a layer of velvet. At least it can be seen slightly clearly. This as far as his gaze could see, Su Nuo did not see his familiar bedroom. A room of no size, with a leather-wrapped door on the right, a desk next to the left wall, a pile of papers scattered on the table, a dial telephone that has only been seen in movies, and a delicately designed cigar box. In the middle of the door and desk, there is a wooden wardrobe about 2 meters long. The cabinet door is open, and a dark red carpet is laid on the legs of the cabinet, which looks expensive. And before the promise, he was lying on the floor in the center of the room. The moonlight from the outside world fell in, not knowing whether it was due to eye problems or as it was, he looked at the surrounding environment and covered it with a layer of red veil. The pain in his body was slowly diminishing, and his consciousness was gradually becoming clearer. I've traveled. Many helpless and panicked emotions surged in his heart, and Su Nuo lay on the ground in a daze, slowly opening his mouth. As an orphan, I was picked up by my master when I was still in my infancy and brought back to the mountains. My childhood memories were either reciting the thick and unnamed scriptures in the mountains, or being taken down by my master for some shopping, or doing some rituals at the homes of villagers. But even with such innate conditions, Su Nuo never believed that such strange things would exist in the world, otherwise he would not have chosen to become a psychological counselor when he grew up. After all the rituals with my master are done in a formal way. Nowadays, doing psychological counseling can earn money faster than doing rituals. Anyway, it's all about earning psychological comfort. And nowadays, only fake Taoists pretend to be gods and ghosts, while true Taoists advocate science eliminating the mixed thoughts from his mind. Su Nuo struggled to digest the surging memories that had just come. After 4 or 5 minutes, he couldn't help but sigh. If it weren't for the constant pain throughout his body reminding him, he would have thought it was just a bizarre dream. I really crossed over to this young man named Dante Ashborne. As a master who has just been recognized by professional Taoist priests as one of the heavenly Sha twin stars, Dante Ashborne's past experiences are simply too much. It's more exciting. Even though his parents passed away one after another, he didn't seem to be affected by these aspects and instead lived a colorful life, especially in his private life. This can be seen from the many ex-girlfriends who account for over 70% of the memory fragments. As a top student who had pursued further studies at Yale University, he did not choose to work for any federal official agency after graduation. Instead, he came to Nolan City to open a detective agency. It was precisely because at that time Dante was in a passionate relationship with the daughter of a Nolan City counselor, which belonged to Running for Love. This is like a graduate from Qingbei who refuses an olive branch offered by a ministry and chooses to open a supermarket in a 4th or 5th tier city, just as stubborn. And the development of this world is similar to that of the late 19th century on Earth, which was a time of parallel systems and human imagination. For example, the neighbors of the Heisen Federation were still an empire with a remaining feudal system. For example, shortly after the beginning of the electrical revolution, however, these seem to be very far away from Dante. In his memory, apart from his ex-girlfriends, he only accumulated boring knowledge in search of his next girlfriend. God knows how this guy got into Yellowton University. As for his younger brother, he successfully got into Brooke Military Academy last year. Compared to this older brother, his younger brother Gerda Ahborn appears more stable and honest. The sorting of memories came to an end, and the pain in the body weakened to a tolerable level. Su Nuo tried to move around and found that control over the body began to recover. So he propped his elbow on the floor, sideways, and sat up bit by bit. And this process almost exhausted all his energy, forcing him to gasp for breath. According to Dante's last memory, this is the apartment he temporarily rented. In the evening, his friend and partner Kyle came here and planned to attend a banquet hosted by the City Hall in Nolan City next Wednesday. There will be many beautiful young ladies from affluent families and lonely and charming husbands to attend. This is where their fun lies. So what happened afterwards? Su Noa couldn't help but frown, and his original memory came to an abrupt end. From the feedback from his body, it seemed that something unusual had happened afterwards, otherwise it would be impossible to explain his journey and the pain that spread throughout his body. Where did Kyle go? Could it be everything he did and then ran away? Su Noa pondered and analyzed the possibility of this matter, but the lack of memory left everything at a loss. Therefore, he had to lower his head and start examining his body. He found that his suit had no visible damage except for a few wrinkles. Suppressing the pain, he rolled up his sleeves and pants, and there were no wounds on his fair skin. Can it be an internal injury? Su Noa slowly stood up and saw a dressing mirror on the diagonal corner of the wardrobe, a metal base, and a frame decorated with simple patterns. Through his blood-colored gaze and with the help of the relatively bright moonlight, he walked to the mirror, reached out to wipe his eyes, and found that the previous blood-red spots were due to the blood-filled eyes. Then, he saw his current self. A pale to colorless young face, with black hair and blue pupils, and a well-proportioned figure. He looks very similar to the Arandosaurus from his youth. No wonder you have so many ex-girlfriends. Su Noa reached out and pinched his face, a hardware beauty with its own suppression level that would be difficult to resist on anyone. Because his gaze was not clear enough, he continued forward until he was only a fist away from the mirror. He tilted his head slightly, wanting to observe the congestion in his eyes more carefully. As the angle of refraction changes, the viewing angle also moves accordingly. The wardrobe behind the mirror, with its slightly concealed door, seems to have been deliberately inserted into a gap. Su Noa was somewhat surprised and turned his head very slowly. In the gaps of the cabinet door, he saw a face hidden in the darkness, with a strange smile on it. And that pair of bloodshot eyes were staring straight at him. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Late Night Guests. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Late Night Guests. Push and Push. Su Noa was so frightened by this scene that he stepped back and instinctively pinched a meridian formula with both hands, as if only in this way could he temporarily calm the panic at the moment. This is a handprint specifically designed to calm and ward off evil spirits. When placed on Earth, although he had never seen any gods, ghosts, or demons, he still followed his master's teachings and learned many basic Taoist skills honestly. Now suddenly traversing such an unfamiliar world, even though nothing beyond ordinary people's imagination happened in Dante's memory, the act of traversing itself was already unreasonable enough, let alone witnessing such a terrifying scene shortly after opening his eyes. He kept his breathing rhythm as tight as possible, his muscles tense all over, staring at the face in the wardrobe that always maintained a strange smile, as if warning the other person not to come over. Cold sweat oozed from the promised forehead, and the heel of the left foot was gently lifted, placing the body's center of gravity on the right foot. The mind was rapidly pondering countermeasures. There are no weapons available in the room, and the window is only 2 meters away from me. This type of building, similar to the late Victorian period, adopts a design of wooden bay windows, which means, if you're fast enough, you can definitely use the tremendous inertia of your body's approach to break through the window and get out. Wait, this is the 6th floor, the position of the door is on the right-hand side. If you want to break through the door, you must pass through the position of the wardrobe. Although it is not yet clear whether the thing inside is actually human, based on the condition of one's own body, it is difficult to guarantee that it can withstand potential attacks. Su Noa's mind was thinking recklessly, but his gaze dared not leave the wardrobe for a moment. Although he is a professional Taoist, he has never had the experience of subduing demons in his past 20 years of life. Apart from being praised by my master for having extremely strong spiritual awareness, when I was a child, everyone else is just an ordinary person. As for those already familiar Dharma formulas, Taoist scriptures, and talismans, they have become products of daily sleep. After all, after the founding of the People's Republic of China, it is not allowed to become a fairy, and even demons and monsters have no living environment. The so-called spiritual sense, no matter how strong, has no place to be used. After a long period of silence and eye contact, the things in the cabinet remained motionless. The smiling face that looked and penetrated, with blood-red eyes that didn't blink, was like a demon mask outlined by a primitive tribe. It was quietly hidden in the dark space inside the cabinet, as if mocking the humans in front of it. This face, Su Nua took a breath, frowned slightly, and fragments of memory appeared, making him increasingly familiar with the ghost face in front of him. Kyle Owen. Yes, this is Kyle's face. That original friend and partner. As Dante's best companion in Nolan City, this Kyle's biggest characteristic is wealth and being particularly promiscuous. As the only descendant of the senior superintendent of the Nolan City Police Department, he can be considered one of the top nobles in this small city. This is undoubtedly a standard element of fox friends and dog friends in any novel or movie. How could he be in the wardrobe? Su Nua couldn't help but feel a doubt in his heart. He tried to move his body forward and found that Kyle in the cabinet had no movement. So he boldly approached and gently pushed open the cabinet door. Squeak. A piercing opening and closing sound sounded, and Kyle's body in the cabinet seemed to lose its support. With a muffled bang, it fell onto the dark red carpet. He's dead. Su Nua furrowed his brows and stood still. The discovery in front of him did not alleviate any of his nervousness, but rather made him feel even more terrifying and eerie. The situation is unclear when crossing over, with a corpse lying in front of me and a memory loss nowhere to be found who was the person who killed the original and Kyle. What exactly happened before? How did I travel through it myself? How to solve the body of this friend in front of me? How to explain this to his father, a senior police officer? Various mysteries filled his mind like a jumble, undoubtedly exacerbating the symptoms of headaches. The urgent task is to first dispose of the body, and then study how to run away. The truth can be slowly explored later, and the other thing is to try and see if we can go back. Su Nua sighed and instinctively ignored the option of leniency in confession. You should know that the world you are currently in is not Earth, but there are no civilized law enforcement rules. If he goes to the police station to report the real situation, does anyone believe that without further explanation, the senior police officer will definitely choose to let him bury his son? After making the decision, he no longer hesitated, promising to endure the pain on his body in search for tools in the room that could be used to hold a corpse. He didn't dare to turn on the light because he didn't understand the external situation and was not sure if the killer of himself and Kyle had gone far. Therefore, he had to search in the room under the moonlight, but after half a day, he still found nothing and had to give up temporarily. The apartment I rented originally only had one bedroom and one living room. Although the room area was small, it was expensive because it was located in the city center of Nolan. And years of extravagance and drinking have already drained Dante's savings. In addition to basic facilities and furniture, this apartment can be said to be in poverty. This can be seen from the ubiquitous promissory notes on the desk. How much money does this guy owe outside? Su Nua flipped through the IOU on the table while muttering, he really didn't understand this behavior of slapping his face and pretending to be fat to find a woman. Moreover, with the face of his original body, it is not difficult to become a soft guy. But precisely this is still a spirited and lustful hungry ghost, who only likes to throw 1,000 gold coins recklessly and doesn't like to be thrown 1,000 gold coins recklessly. So he is even more unable to understand what is this. Su Nua suddenly discovered a small and exquisite silver badge pressed under the cigar box, with intricate patterns printed on it. The badge looks like a combination of a six-pointed star and a triangle, with a circle at the center and lines resembling ghost symbols engraved inside. He curiously picked up the badge, whether it was due to psychological or other reasons. As soon as he picked it up, a refreshing sensation swept over his body, and even the pain seemed to have diminished significantly. What items did Kyle bring? Fragments of memory shot out, and related things came to mind. This was something Kyle brought with him tonight, and it is said to be one of the spoils seized by his father. As a senior police officer, it is very reasonable for some criminal evidence to be confiscated in accordance with the law, and the original person seems accustomed to this and does not find it strange. Could it be because of this thing that the killer caught a glimpse and wanted to kill and steal goods? But if that's the case, it would be very unreasonable for the badge to remain on site. But apart from that, there is currently no information to support the cause of two people's deaths, even if it is far-fetched. Promise to casually put the badge into your pocket. Anyway, it is one of the only items that can be associated with tonight. Put it on your body first and then slowly study it. At present, we still need to find a way to dispose of the body. Watching Kyle lying on the floor with a strange smile, Su-Nua didn't even think about it before taking off his jacket and covering his smiling face. Watching strange and creepy people in the middle of the night. After looking around again, it seemed that the only option was to package the body in bed sheets and transport it out. Although it's easy to attract attention, it's better than leaving it alone in a room. After all, Kyle's relationship with his original body is not a secret. If he is found dead in an apartment and is nowhere to be found, he will be listed as a wanted criminal by the police 100%. But if both of them are nowhere to be seen, there will be some room for maneuver even if discovered in the future. Dong dong dong. Just as he promised to drag Kyle to the bedroom bed with all his might, the door of the apartment was suddenly knocked on. Upon hearing this sound, he instinctively tightened his nerves and slowed down his breathing. Damn it, who's knocking on the door at this moment? Su-Nua's mind was tense. In the current situation, whether to open the door or not, and whether to pretend not to be at home, dong dong dong. The sound of knocking on the door appeared very abrupt in the late night, and the people outside seemed to recognize that someone was at home in the apartment. Promise no longer hesitated, he pushed Kyle's body into the bed with both hands, then rubbed his eyes and deliberately made his clothes even more messy. He picked up the iron desk lamp in the room, shook it in his hand, and then walked to the position behind the door. Who? End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Mysterious Officer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Mysterious Officer, Peter Pabos, open the door. The voice outside the door has a strong Lantis accent, slightly abrupt, with a rising tail tone. Peter Pabos is a police chief at the Nolan City Police Station, who is rigid and has a hot temper. The jurisdiction is the block where the apartment is located, and under his rule, the security in this block is in a mess. But he seems to have a strong disdain for this guy from the original body. Su-Nua searched for memories in his mind, and the entanglement between his original identity and the other person seemed to be caused by his choice to bring the detective agency to this street. Because in Sheriff Peter's view, this was a desecration of his workability, but due to Kyle's father being a senior police officer, he had to swallow this breath. Is there anything wrong with you coming so late? The promise was not in a hurry to open the door. According to the laws of the Heisent Federation, residents have the right to refuse all visits for non-official reasons when they are in their private residence. I brought a law enforcement order, open the door. The voice outside the door appeared impatient, seeming to have a great aversion to not opening the door, but it was clear that they were also forced to follow the rules. Okay, please wait a moment. Su-Nua quickly placed the table lamp on the desk with his feet on it, and then quickly sorted out his clothes without turning on the lamp, in order to hide the dark red in his eyes. As he opened the door, he felt a bit confused and unclear. Sorry, Sheriff Peter, I have already laid down to rest. Outside the door stood 3 police officers in deep blue uniforms, wearing badges and big brimmed hats. Peter Pabos, who had 2 thick beards, angrily casually waved the law enforcement order, indicating that the process had been completed. Then, he said to the 2 police officers next to him. Sir, you see, this is that lazy guy. Su-Nua did not pay attention to Sheriff Peter's definition of him, and his gaze was focused on the other two accompanying police officers from the beginning. Their shoulder badges each have 3 4-pointed stars, clearly higher in rank than Sheriff Peter, who only has 3 inverted V. As a non-professional detective, I am naturally familiar with this profession that requires constant interaction. The meaning behind Sheriff Peter's words is that these 2 senior inspectors are looking for him so late. Thanks to Kyle's friend, the senior police officers at the Nolan City Police Station were familiar to him, but the 2 unfamiliar faces in front of him were clearly not among them. And from Peter's seemingly respectful but not very concerned tone, it can be seen that these 2 should be people from out of town who came to work. So, what exactly is it that they come to find themselves? At this moment, without understanding any of the other party's intentions, I cannot show any hint of carelessness. Su Noa was always pondering, but there was no hint on his face. He pretended to yawn and gestured as he turned aside. "Please come in, what's the reason for being so late?" Peter stood still, looking really disgusted by the handsome young man in front of him. He snorted coldly. "Who knows which lonely and unbearable lady in your room is trembling in bed?" "There is no lonely and unbearable lady, but there is a cold and smiling body." "Why don't you take it with you?" Su Noa couldn't help but mutter to himself, his expression still showed no signs of change. He sent out an invitation to enter the house, but the 3 police officers remained motionless. Based on this situation, it seems that the other party did not notice Kyle's situation, which relieved him a bit. "Mr. Dante, I heard you are a graduate of the Department of Sociology at the University of Yellowton. Do you still remember Irving Hilton?" The person being questioned is a police officer on the left, who looks very serious, with brown hair and yellow pupils, and exudes an aura of being kept away from strangers. Irving Hilton. Su Noa instinctively recalled and quickly thought of the name mentioned by the other party. "I remember my classmate in college, but he was in the law department and there hasn't been much contact since graduation." "There's no connection left." "Are you sure?" The brown-haired police officer looked straight at him with a tone of great suspicion. Su Noa didn't rush to answer, pretended to be serious and thinking, and tried to make his behavior conform to his original habits as much as possible. After a moment, he yawned again and replied. "Yes, police officer. My daily work is quite busy, so I don't remember things that are not important. You also know that in our industry, we always have to focus our limited energy on worthwhile things. So, what's wrong with Owen?" There doesn't seem to be anything suspicious about this reaction, as can be seen from Sheriff Peter's attitude. "Indeed, sir, this guy's limited energy is almost entirely focused on these socialites in Nolan City. If it weren't for his limited energy, I believe he could spread his love to the entire Federation." The satire of old acquaintances is not worth mentioning in Su Noa's eyes. The other party is talking about Dante Ashborne, a playboy. What is it to do with his promising young man? The brown-haired police officer looked at the handsome young man in front of him without saying a word. His suspicion did not diminish, but he didn't say anything more. Instead, he casually glanced at another police officer located in the center next to him. "Since that's the case, then don't disturb Mr. Dante. If you receive any messages from Owen Hilton in the future, please feel free to contact us." The police officer in the center spoke, looking around 30 years old. He also had black hair and blue pupils, and his tall nose bridge matched perfectly with his facial features, making him look very charming as a mature man. His deep and mellow voice, with a pure Teton accent, proves that he is a man from the federal capital. Su Noa smiled and nodded in response, saying happily, "No problem, Sir Police Officer. It is the duty of every federal citizen to cooperate with the work of the police station." The same blue-eyed police officer also smiled slightly, with a curved corner of his mouth. He took out a business card from the inside of his uniform pocket and handed it over. Su Noa took it and glanced at it. The workmanship of the business card was very exquisite, with a black background and a gold border outline. The center was printed with a gilded gold signature written in Spencer style. Leon no thanks. There is also a string of 9-digit phone numbers in the bottom right corner. It seems like a wealthy person in this era, it is possible to use this kind of business card, and the temperament looks very appropriate. Apart from the original strange guy who puffs up his face and pretends to be fat, it is likely that they are all from the real wealthy class. Su Noa sighed in his heart and increasingly felt that his original behavior was shameless. He watched as several police officers left, with a perfectly fitting smile on his face. At least we have passed this level. Just as he was about to close the door and return to the house to continue dealing with the body, he found that the blue-eyed police officer named Leon had reappeared at the door at some point, which startled him greatly. "Officer, do you have anything else to do?" Leon Norfinks still maintained a smile, his body leaning forward slightly, and slowly said in a voice that only two people could hear. "I forgot to remind you, Mr. Dante. The body of that young Master Kyle needs to be disposed of as soon as possible." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Response to Spells. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Response to Spells. Lion's light and ethereal words made Su Noa feel like he was struck by lightning, and a chill rushed straight from his coccyx to the back of his head. His mind was spinning and he instinctively wanted to deny it. But the other party's unquestionable and slightly teasing tone was clearly not asking, but explaining a fact. This elegant-looking police officer, with a everything-in-control attitude, is like a hunter teasing his prey when bored. Promising to take 2 steps back without leaving any trace, he said in a normal tone as much as possible. "Sorry, I can't understand what you're saying." "Hee, don't be nervous, Mr. Dante. I'm not the culprit." Lion shrugged his shoulders, still smiling and saying, "Don't you invite me in to sit down." Su Noa stood motionless at the door, maintaining a highly guarded state. He didn't understand the true intention of the police officer on the other sides, going back and forth, and before confirming it clearly, he chose to remain silent. Lion didn't show much concern. It didn't look like a police officer visiting and handling cases, but rather like a new tenant visiting their neighbors. Perhaps Officer Peter was right. It would be impolite if he accidentally bumped into a beautiful lady. He turned his head and made a joke that was not funny, but his blue eyes always looked calm, like the bottomless depths of the deep sea. "Since Mr. Dante is unwilling, please rest earlier. Oh, by the way, if you encounter any strange and tricky things, remember to call me. Of course, if it's a thank you, it's also possible." Lion chuckled lightly, leaving behind the last incomprehensible sentence. His right index and middle fingers lightly tapped his left chest twice, performing a farewell salute that only the old aristocrats of the Heisen Federation would use, and slowly disappeared into the pitch-black corridor. This person walks without any sound, like a ghost. Promise to lock the door and mutter softly. His back has been soaked with sweat, and some of the strength he had just recovered feels exhausted. At this moment, he even feels dizzy standing in place. He reluctantly walked to the desk and sat down, poured himself a glass of ice water, and drank it all in one gulp. At present, we cannot rush to check the body of that friend under the bed. Leon clearly knew something, but his casual appearance didn't seem like the culprit behind him. No, we can't make hasty decisions. There are many perverted assassins on Earth who are willing to return to the scene to check their masterpieces after committing crimes. It is said that it is to rediscover the pleasure of committing the crime and pursue spiritual pleasure and detachment. Oh my goodness, what the hell is all this about? Su Noa reached out and grabbed his hair, looking very nervous, but he immediately stopped this action and changed to pretending to comb his hair. Be rigorous. After tidying up his clothes and appearance, he sat quietly in the chair, tapping his fingers lightly on the dark red tabletop. Under the dim moonlight, the whole person seemed to be hidden in the shadows. It's strange enough to travel inexplicably and get involved in a strange murder case. I don't know if anyone is peeping, so the body can't be processed urgently for now. Give it a try first, but I'm not sure if I can sense it in this world. Promise to remain calm for a moment, sit upright, fold your hands on your lower abdomen, press your thumbs against each other, and silently recite with your eyes closed. Tai Xing, constantly changing. Exorcism and enchantment, protecting one's life and body. Wisdom is clear and pure, and the mind is peaceful. The three souls are eternal, and the soul is devoid of sorrow. The lineage inherited by Su Nuo is not a prestigious sect like Shinilonghu. According to his master, although their lineage is sparse in population, they have been passed down for thousands of years. It's just that their ancestors have trained them and they haven't spread their branches or leaves. Moreover, there are countless ancient Buddhist scriptures in the mountains. It was only after promising to go down the mountain that I discovered that the idle books, used by the master to cushion the table legs in the mountains when I was young, were actually the only copies that had been lost outside for many years. He started the class with the Pure Heart Mantra, which is also a proper process. First, calm down and eliminate clutter, and then proceed with other activities. And after reciting the Pure Heart Mantra on earth, which had countless days and months but could only have a psychological effect, unexpectedly, there was an induction after reciting the last sentence. The body, which had always been slightly painful, returned to normal, and the chaotic thoughts were all calmed down. The dark red in the eyes faded in an instant. Su Nuo has been praised by his master for his extremely strong spiritual sense since childhood. For over 20 years, he has never understood the meaning of this sentence. Under the circumstances of ups and downs, I now have a different experience. At this moment, he felt as if the air around him had suddenly stopped flowing. He lifted his eyes lightly, and the world in his eyes slowly became static and abstract. A few crows flew by outside the window, but they seemed to hover in mid-air, their hoarse chirping as if they had been suddenly pressed to silence. Under the pitch-black night, in the dimly lit room, the silhouette of the man on the chair became increasingly blurred and blurred. In the pocket of the suit, a faint light seemed to flash away. Captain, how could Dante still be alive? Joseph opened the car window and lit a cigarette, losing his serious expression from earlier. He leaned back in his chair, his orange eyes fixed on the apartment building across the street that he had just visited. Putting aside this question for now, I would like to say that smoking is harmful to health. Lion loosened his collar while sitting in the back seat, and beside him was Sheriff Peter, who was falling asleep. Okay, I'll try to start this year's 123rd smoking cessation plan tomorrow. Joseph shrugged nonchalantly and continued the previous conversation, saying, "The Truth faction has been like a wild horse in heat lately, and it's unbelievable that Owen Hilton is their overall leader in the Teton region. It's not surprising that not every graduate of Yellowton becomes the cornerstone of the federal government." That's right. For example, Dante, before flipping through his files, I never expected an ordinary person's energy to be so abundant. Lion turned his head and said seriously, "Joseph, I once told you not to look at anyone, including ordinary people, through appearances." Okay, Captain, I admit I envy his love history. Joseph's expression at this moment was vastly different from his previous serious smile. He smoked very quickly, and in just a few words, he had already finished a cigarette. Flipping through the pocket, I was about to add it again when I saw Lion's very calm blue eyes in the rearview mirror. He instinctively sat up straight and held the steering wheel with both hands, shifting the topic and saying, "Captain, according to intelligence investigations, Owen disappeared in the Teton region after stealing the contraband 1.27 from the Research Institute. What do you think he really wants to do?" Past experience has taught Joseph that he can joke with the captain when he has nothing to do, but never provoke a member of the Norfinks family who appears exceptionally calm and is watching over you. The Truth faction wants to make some big moves during this year's Guardian Day. Since the last clue was shown in Nolan City, it proves that this city must have something important to them. Important enough to rely on the power of taboos. Lion still spoke in a calm tone. "It's just a pity that the Kyle family, a well-behaved senior police officer, suffered such an unfounded disaster. So I don't understand why Dante is still alive. The 1.27 taboo requires the power of life to activate and supplement, and it's impossible to miss any ordinary people who come into contact with it. That proves that Dante is not as ordinary as we imagine, right? Joseph. Lion's voice suddenly came to an end, and his deep blue eyes suddenly became more peaceful, as if dark waves were surging. His gaze was fixed on the pitch-black window in the apartment building, as if he had discovered something. Joseph, it seems that he is not only extraordinary, but also has some secrets that we don't know. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Divination. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Divination. In the 6th floor room of the apartment, Su Noa sat quietly on a chair. He had never experienced this feeling before, and the clarity of the Lingtai was hard to describe. The whole soul seemed to be pulled away from the body in an instant, feeling the warm and cool breeze before being abruptly pushed back. In this state, it feels like we can even achieve the heaven and earth in our sleeves that our master once said. Su Noa murmured to himself, couldn't help but start trying, with his left palm facing upwards and his thumb quickly counting. This is not the kind of magic that can hold all things as described in the supernatural novels on earth, but a realm that the Great Six Ren cultivates to the highest depths. This requires the diviner to maintain an extremely clear state, without relying on any external objects such as the formula plate, to calculate the contents of the heaven and earth plate, the 4 lessons, the 3 rivers, and the divine and evil, in order to divine personnel. When on earth, it took a lot of effort to make a promise to start a class, and the results displayed by the hexagram were often not accurate. He once asked his master, and only received a few long sighs like shaking his head, times have changed, and so on. However, today, he has an inexplicable confidence in his heart. In this state, it feels like the accuracy of the results obtained from divination will be very high. Su Noa muttered to himself, unable to think carefully about the reason behind it. He glanced at the ancient bronze pendulum clock on the wall, converted time according to the heavenly stems and earthly branches, and repeated the first question repeatedly in his mind. How did I come into this world? However, the result of the first calculation was beyond his expectations. Whenever he reached the final step, he could not continue to calculate, as if there was an invisible force interfering with him, preventing him from obtaining the true answer. That's right, even things like traveling through time can happen. Only by figuring out this tiny path can I have a ghost. Su Noa let out a sigh, but did not give up. Instead, he began to calculate the second question in his heart. Can we still go back? The result of this calculation was very fast and obvious, so fast that it was unbelievable, so obvious that it was repeated several times and all the answers were the same. There is no return. Promising to receive the answer, he remained silent for a long time, lowered his head slightly, rested his left thumb on the last stop, and slowly sighed. Master, I'm afraid I won't be able to see your elderly home for a while. The current situation can be said to be very bad. I don't know how to deal with the body under the bedroom bed, the culprit is still unknown, and I don't know how to solve the huge debt and a bunch of mess left by my original body. And the mysterious appearance of the lion police officer always lingers in his mind, his deep blue eyes like a deep pool, making people feel unfathomable and cold all over. At least for now, the only good news is that having studied Taoism for over 20 years will be useful in this world, Su Noa chuckled to himself. Even worse, I can still make a living as a fortune teller in this unfamiliar Western world. After a long silence, he leaned heavily against the chair, covering his incredibly handsome face with both hands, murmuring with mixed emotions of loss, sadness, and oppression. Hello, I'm Dante Ashborne. Dante didn't blame himself for too long, and his current situation didn't allow it either. He adjusted his emotions slightly and quickly started tonight's third hexagram with the spiritual clarity brought by the pure heart curse. How did Kyle and I die? The result displayed by the hexagram made him feel both beyond reason and expected. The power of ghosts and gods. If translated in the current universal language of this world, it would be mysterious, indescribable power. It's indeed a mysterious world. Dante sighed. Luckily Taoism could still be used, and luckily he had not missed any homework in these years. He continued to divine and predict his next good or bad fortune. As expected, it was a sign of great calamity. He remained unmoved and continued to speculate, because even with the use of hexagrams, there was still a solution that could lead to a life or death. But what Dante never expected was that the only little G fell on Lion, who had just left. It seems that we really need to establish more emotional connections with this police officer. On the cobblestone road of the street, in the black luxury sedan of the Lychee brand. Joseph, who didn't know what had happened, looked at the captain behind him in a daze. He had just had a good chat, but Leon's aura suddenly changed, so much so that he thought something unexpected had happened. As a result, there was no discovery after a round of exploration, and my captain suddenly regained his strength. Captain, what have you discovered? What secret does Dante have that we don't know? Lion slowly withdrew his gaze from the apartment building, pondered for a moment, shook his head, and said. Let's drive back to our residence first. Oh, okay. Joseph skillfully started the vehicle, shifted gears to refuel, and the car began to move smoothly, slowly leaving the neighborhood. As an experienced member of this special operations team, he is well aware that when carrying out tasks, he only needs to unconditionally execute orders. Lion leaned against the high-end and comfortable leather seats, quietly watching the street view speeding backwards outside the window. The city of Nolan is not large and belongs to the northern part of the Lantis province. Compared to the bustling federal capital, it can only be considered a remote and impoverished place. The backward urban planning, coupled with the construction of a large number of industrial facilities, has made the air here extremely poor. If it weren't for the need to carry out tasks, in his capacity, he might not have set foot here in his lifetime. Opening a bottle of precious champagne from the wine cabinet in the back seat, Lion recalled the scene he had just discovered in his mind. Just now, he was constantly observing the situation of the apartment building, and during a conversation with Joseph, he clearly felt a change in ether energy in the room where Dante was located. Very subtle and solid, if it weren't for his expertise in spiritual power, he would have overlooked it. The most important thing is that Lion had tried multiple times just now and was surprised to find that his power could not penetrate the thin layer of ether energy field. Unlike the familiar chaotic, disorderly, and violent forces, the ether energy field that envelopes Dante's room appears somewhat mysterious. And the strange thing was that a trace of the ether energy was transmitted to him, but before he could defend and intercept it, it quietly disappeared. It's like coming over specifically to take a look, and then it dissipates. This series of discoveries sparked Lion's strong interest in Dante. A guy who was still an ordinary person before today has formed an ether energy field so pure that even his own spiritual power cannot break through, and he can even approach without being noticed. What a lucky and talented guy he is. Lion pondered and drank the champagne in his glass, his deep blue eyes becoming even more profound. As the captain of the 3rd Action Team of the Heisenberg Federal Bureau of Investigation, he is a sufficiently outstanding presence in terms of talent, vision, and experience. Moreover, he is the owner of the noble surname Norfinx, which has been passed down for thousands of years. Dante, this playboy, whether intentionally or unintentionally, has already been associated with Owen of the Truth Church and has survived the contact with Taboos, which is enough to prove his uniqueness. From any perspective, Dante is destined to enter this circle in the future. So Lion is not in a hurry, he wants to wait for the handsome young man to come and find him. This is the pride of the old aristocracy, and even if the system changes, it still exists. Moreover, the main reason for coming to Nolan City this time is to deal with the lunatics of the Truth faction. Confirm the existence of Dante Ashborne as a survivor, perhaps even a big fish could be caught. And the talent that this person has just shown belongs to an additional gain. As for whether he will sneak away or die suddenly, it is not within Lion's scope of consideration. How could someone who is noticed by oneself easily get away or die? Adding a little help just now, he believed that this lucky guy would definitely take the initiative to contact him. After all, let old Tom take care of the body of Kyle in the trunk and burn it with his family when we go back. We helped this playboy solve such a big problem, I believe he would be very surprised. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. You are a lucky person. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. You are a lucky person. Dante did not continue to gossip for a simple reason. The more calculations he made, the more uncertain he became, and perhaps even more dangerous he became. Unknown things often evoke great fear, reminiscent of their strange journeys, the Taoist techniques that have never worked on earth but have a strong sense of induction, and the indescribable transparency and comfort just as reciting the pure heart mantra. Dante quickly took another big sip of ice water to suppress his shock. Now, he has an unprecedented and uncontrollable impulse to try many Taoist techniques he has learned before, in order to explore this mysterious world. However, this strong idea was forcefully suppressed by him. Before understanding the mysterious power and system of this world, it is best to avoid gossip as much as possible, so as not to provoke some inexplicable things. The crow flying from somewhere outside the window, always hoarsely chirping in the late night, as if trying to vent the anger that had just been abruptly stopped. Dante stared at the location of the bedroom, where there was still the body of his friend waiting to be disposed of hidden under the bed. For some reason, knowing the body was lying there was no initial fear. He waited for a while longer, pretended not to be sleepy, yawned back to the bedroom, pulled all the curtains, and gently closed the door. Bang! Push and push. Dante rushed out of the bedroom quickly, his face turning pale, as if shocked by a ghost. Where's the corpse? It flew. It's a fake corpse. He never left the room, but Kyle, who was clearly hidden under the bed, disappeared from sight like this. He has only seen Lion and others at the door, but he hasn't let them in yet. Damn it. What kind of creepy and terrifying place is this? By the way, Leon. It must be that Leon caused the ghost. Dante suddenly remembered that when he parted ways earlier, the police officer named Lion inexplicably said, "Thank you, too." At that time, he had not yet figured out the meaning of this sentence. Now, with the help of Ling Tai Ching-ming, he could deduce a rough answer with a little deduction. Ignoring any other thoughts, but still considering caution, he placed his back on the wall to ensure that his perspective was as comprehensive and unobstructed as possible. He picked up the dial phone from his desk and quickly shook it towards the phone number on Lion's business card. Hello, this is Iris Flower Agency. May I ask who you are looking for? A crisp female voice came from the microphone. Iris Flower Office. Isn't it a police station? Dante frowned, but considering the current situation, he said directly. This is Dante Ashborne. I'm looking for Officer Lion, and he left me this phone number. There was a moment of silence across from him, as if confirming relevant information. Shortly afterwards, he briefly replied. Okay, please wait a moment. The waiting time was not long, but Dante dared not slack off at all. He stared around intently, holding the microphone in his right hand and pinching the Shentian Divine Decision in his left hand. This is a handmade move specifically designed to ward off evil spirits, with great power. If it weren't Lion who did it, then he would be ready to confront his opponent at any time. The big deal is death. It wasn't until the pure Titan sounded in the microphone that he slightly relieved some of his nervousness. Mr. Dante, it seems like we've only been apart for a while. Officer Lion, after you left, I thought about it and felt like I should thank you in person. Oh. It seems you have noticed. You don't need to be polite. I think you definitely don't want to get involved in any trouble. I'm already involved, isn't it? A few light chuckles came from the other end of the phone, but the tone still sounded so calm. Your understanding is very correct, but even to my surprise, you can still live well now. Upon hearing this sentence, Dante fell silent for a moment. What does it mean that you can still live well? Lion seems to know a lot about things, and even if he tries to cover it up, he doesn't seem to be able to solve the problem. So he tentatively answered, I'm not sure, I don't even remember what happened. After waking up, Kyle collapsed in front of me. Honesty is not entirely possible, but it's better not to say a word, let alone Lion, the only path indicated by the hexagram. It's normal to say that, after all, although there are very few cases of contact with taboos without death, it's not uncommon. Taboos. You can understand it as something with extraordinary power, and there are many forms of its existence. If you're interested, I can have someone explain it to you in detail later. Dante noticed that Lion no longer used honorific language to address him, but now he was not in the mood to contemplate this irrelevant matter. He dragged the topic back to the most concerning issue. Thank you, but now what I'm even more curious about is, how did you manage to transport Kyle's body away without any movement? Just a little trick. It's really a vague yet plausible answer. But Ding slightly calmed down and continued to ask, is Owen related to this matter? The relationship is significant, to be precise, you can understand him as the murderer of Mr. Kyle Owen's family. Wait, a family. Dante instantly understood something, and then tried to recall Irving's appearance in his mind. He remembered that he was a young man who was not usually talkative but could be passionate in every debate. He looks very ordinary, but the only thing that leaves a deep impression is his blonde hair and a very pointed hooked nose. Accompanied by that unsmiling face, I suddenly felt a bit gloomy when I recalled it at this moment. He actually killed the Kyle family. That's a senior police officer. Compared to these things, what I am more curious about is what you did in the room after I left. Lion's words interrupted Dante, who was in shock. He frowned at the words but didn't rush to answer. When divining, I hide in the shadow and do it in the way of the universe in my sleeve. Can this also be discovered? I just sat at my desk and calmed down for a while. Officer, as you know, it's difficult for ordinary people to remain calm when faced with such situations. Really? But the sudden change in the ether energy field tells me that you shouldn't just be sitting in the room. Ether energy field. What strange thing is that? Is it related to Lion's claim of extraordinary power? Dante's brow furrowed tighter and tighter. Sorry, I don't understand. Oh, it was my negligence. After all, based on past experiences, it seems that you were indeed an ordinary person before encountering this matter. As for these professional terms, I'm sure you're not very familiar with them either. Lion on the other end of the phone said slowly. But it's not important, you're no longer. What does it mean? How come I'm not an ordinary person anymore? As if knowing what Dante was thinking at this moment, Lion continued. Survivors who are able to come into contact with taboo objects but do not die often activate their own energy sensing with the ether realm, thus possessing certain extraordinary qualities. Coincidentally, for these lucky ones, it happens to be the field I am responsible for. 24, Joel Street, Queens. Choose a time and come over. Lion's tone exuded an irresistible flavor. It is obvious that one has been manipulated, and the other party is precisely aware that their top priority is to figure out these things, so they will definitely not choose to refuse. Dante looked at the sky and then looked around the room, speaking with a tone of disappointment, helplessness, and some expectation mixed in. What's going on now? I'm afraid something strange might happen, why don't you come pick me up? End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Taboos and the Ethereum Realm. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Taboos and the Ethereum Realm. Under the dim yellow streetlight, Dante walked out of the apartment building and tightly wrapped his black windbreaker around him. My heart was beating rapidly in the moment I just opened the door. This feeling of completely entering an unfamiliar environment and accepting myself as Dante Ashborne was quite strange and uncomfortable. Immediately, his gaze quickly looked around, and only after confirming that no abnormalities were found did he have time to carefully examine this unfamiliar and mysterious world for the first time. It was already late at night, and there was no one on the street. On the sidewalk beside the stone slab road, there were trees with twisted branches. The walls of the houses on both sides were densely covered with metal pipes and thick black wires, like the crisscrossing veins of the human body. There is a small square not far from the street, and in the center of the square stands a statue of a goddess wearing armor. At the foot of the statue, there is a stone tablet, but due to the influence of night vision, the view is not real. This steam industry mixed with a world of electrical revolution is so contrary to common sense. Dante thought of certain concepts on Earth and couldn't help but take a deep breath. However, he was almost choked by the burning smell in the air and couldn't speak. He coughed for a while before stopping, and his pale face blushed as a result. We still need to get used to it slowly. He stood still, because when he spoke his last words on the phone just now, he clearly felt lying across from him silent for half a day. It is indeed a bit late, and it seems inappropriate for someone to pick me up. However, compared to life's safety, these are not important. Who asked the other party to say that he is responsible for being so lucky? After a slight movement of his body, Dante saw that from the direction of the square, there were equally dim headlights from far to near, pulling his shadow longer and longer. Meeting again so soon, Mr. Dante. By the way, my name is Joseph Curry and I belong to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Third Action Team. Joseph, with a stern face, scanned the handsome young man sitting in the back seat from the rearview mirror, looking slightly uneasy. Special Incident Investigation Bureau. How come I never heard of the name of this institution in my memory? But if I had a choice, I wish I could never see you and this world in my lifetime. Dante muttered inwardly, but his expression still looked very frightened. Hello, Officer Joseph, I'm sorry to disturb you so late. It's just that such a strange thing happened to me. I dare not stay at home anymore. Due to not knowing their specific organization, Dante still chose to call them police officers. After all, when they first met, they were wearing the clothes of a senior police inspector. I understand, but disturbing others' sleep is always a less gentlemanly thing. Joseph took out a pack of cigarettes and handed them over. Seeing the young man behind him showing an apologetic and refusing smile, he lit it on his own. Our captain should have already talked to you on the phone. If you have any further questions, you can ask me first. I have a lot of questions, but I'm afraid you can't take it anymore. Dante thought for a moment in his mind and first asked the most crucial question. The Lion police officer said that I have been in contact with contraindications before. So since I am still alive, will there be any hidden dangers left behind, or will I inexplicably encounter danger? The hexagram once showed that the result was a great calamity, so it is necessary to first figure out where the calamity lies. Not a bad question. Joseph took a puff of his cigarette and his expression remained very serious. In theory, it does exist. In theory. Yes, the essence of taboos is actually something that has been contaminated with too much extraordinary power. For ordinary people, even a small touch without any protection can cause death in an instant. Even if one survives by chance, there may inevitably be some sequelae or similar situations. Like a toxic gas? Ding asked. Almost, but not accurate enough. Joseph continued, according to the experimental findings of the Federal Research Institute, the dangers brought by taboos are not limited to material harm. On the contrary, there are a large number of taboos that can affect the spiritual level of organisms, such as unconscious madness, chaos, and even self-destruction. In short, you just need to understand it as something that can exercise extraordinary power and is particularly dangerous. Dante remained silent for a moment, silently raising the level of danger in this world. Then, with a hint of luck in his mind, he asked, Just now you mentioned that this is theoretically speaking, but in reality. Actually, it's more dangerous. Dante. Joseph curled the corner of his mouth, seemingly enjoying his wicked taste, but still explained seriously. You need to understand that taboos, which are dangerous things, generally do not appear around ordinary people. When they do, there are only two possibilities. One is newly discovered and has not yet been processed and taken into custody, while the other is artificially used. Unfortunately, you belong to the latter. Imagine, what would the user most likely do if they were told that someone had been affected by taboos but did not die? Dante suddenly thought of Owen, whom Lion had mentioned before, and he must have had something to do with his contamination with taboos. After all, the death of the Kyle family had already confirmed this. Wait. Taboos. Death from contact between lightning and flint. He seemed to suddenly think of something. Badge. That mysterious silver badge. Now it's in my own pocket. Damn it, that thing can't be just a taboo, can it? Dante felt a headache and suddenly felt like his pocket weighed 1,000 pounds. To confirm this, he quickly interrupted Joseph and asked, "What does that taboo thing you're talking about look like?" "A silver box." "Sure enough. Box. Isn't it a badge?" Dante was confused, but remained silent and asked, "Box?" "Officer, I don't remember what box I came into contact with." It's normal not to remember. After all, amnesia is also a type of sequelae, which is not surprising. Joseph suddenly smiled, which surprised Dante a bit. He continued. The taboo item stolen by Owen is indeed a box, which is very certain, but what exactly he wants to do is still under further investigation. That's why I said you're not very safe now. I believe Captain Lion has also told you that staying alive by touching taboos can also gain some special abilities. This is due to the activation of one's own ether energy, which can sense the reasons of the ether realm. Dante did not continue to inquire about the taboo, but a sudden sixth sense told him that the badge should be concealed at this time. "Yes, that's also one of the questions I want to ask," he said. Joseph's car was not driving fast, as if deliberately slowing down the time to answer questions for Dante, the little white man. He said. Scholars and historians from various countries have conducted in-depth research on the world we live in, and ultimately discovered the existence of the Ethereum. Correspondingly, the world we thrive in is known as the material world, or the real world. However, the material world and the ether world are not completely separated, but rather overlap with each other, interdependent and independent of each other. Dialectical materialism. Dante couldn't help but mutter, but noticed Joseph's gaze coming from the rearview mirror and making a serious listening look. For the vast majority of humanity, they will never feel the existence of the ether world throughout their lifetime, because like air, it cannot be directly observed by the naked eye. But ether energy is also a real existence, and all life in this world is essentially a convergence of ether energy, which is also the doctrine of soul and body mentioned by those religions. However, ordinary people are unable to use ether energy independently throughout their lives and can only passively accept the inflow or outflow of ether energy until death. Upon hearing this explanation, Dante roughly understood that the so-called ether realm could be understood as the spiritual realm on earth, such as heaven, Western paradise, and the Taoist 33 heavens, or the differences in world dimensions such as high and low dimensions. As for ether energy, it can be considered as a type of spiritual energy or vitality, and the people who can use it are the sword immortals, cultivators, magicians, and so on mentioned in Earth's supernatural novels. The theory of ether is very complex, and the group of scholars in the Research Institute even established a specialized discipline. If you are interested, you can gradually learn about it in the database of the Special Investigation Bureau in the future. During the conversation, Joseph finally drove the car to its destination. This is a wealthy area in Nolan City, from 1 Joel Street to 120, all of which are row villas. Whether buying or renting here, people are likely to be very wealthy families. He took off the gear, turned off the engine, and opened the car door. Before Dante could ask the meaning of the last sentence, he turned around and showed a meaningful smile. "Get off the car, please do a small routine check first." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Interview. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Interview Check. Joseph looked like a criminal who had successfully abducted and sold underage girls at this moment. But Ding Man's head was full of doubts, and he felt a hint of unease in his heart. After learning that this world has some extraordinary powers, he became particularly sensitive to the word inspection. Relax, we are professionals who only conduct necessary tests on your condition after encountering contraindications to confirm whether your physical and even mental state is normal. It's precisely because it's professional that it's not easy. Okay. Dante followed Joseph up the stairs, holding the idea of a bachelor who should come but couldn't escape, and a bachelor who shouldn't come. He watched as he reached out his hand and lightly tapped the tightly closed bronze door. Dong! 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 The slow and rhythmic knocking on the door echoed through the open street, but there was no movement inside the house. Only the sound of disturbed birds flapping their wings faintly came from around the villa. Dong! 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 Joseph raised his hand and repeated it again, but there was still no response. "Officer Joseph, don't you have a key? I was in a hurry to leave and forgot to bring it with me." The night breeze blew a few leaves, swirling and slowly falling at the door. Dante, standing behind him, inexplicably felt a hint of awkwardness in Joseph's figure. Just as the atmosphere became increasingly eerie, the sound of a small jog could finally be heard inside the villa. Dante and Joseph both breathed a sigh of relief, but fortunately the door finally opened. Sorry, I accidentally fell asleep." A crisp female voice came from behind the door, and Dante curiously tilted her head to look over. She found a girl standing at the door with silver shawl hair and a deep blue dress. She has a delicate doll face, a pair of watery big eyes with an indelible weariness, traces of pillow on her face, and a few drops of sparkling saliva seemed to remain at the corner of her mouth. Joseph was obviously no longer surprised. His poker face nodded slightly and he turned to introduce Dante, saying, "This is Ivy, one of our team members." Then he turned around and continued, "This is the survivor of this case, Dante Ashborne." The silver-haired girl named Ivy was probably in a hurry to open the door just now, and had not noticed Dante yet. At this moment, she heard Joseph's introduction and carefully looked over. It doesn't matter at first glance, the girl's doll face suddenly turned slightly red. Dante didn't react much to this. After all, from any perspective, the only commendable thing left by his original body was this face. Moreover, as a pure and self-righteous little Taoist, he believed that no matter in which world, one should set up the banner of purity in abstinence. Women, that's absolutely unacceptable. I despise my past self in daily life. Cough, cough. Joseph coughed lightly and said to Ivy, "You go prepare first. I'll take him to see the captain and have a check up later." "Yes." Upon hearing the task instructions, Ivy immediately became serious. She stepped aside and couldn't help but glance at the young man in front of her. "It's really beautiful. I really want to draw it down." Dante followed Joseph into the villa and nodded slightly as he passed by Ivy, revealing a self-proclaimed polite smile. The first floor of the villa features an open kitchen and reception hall, with huge crystal chandeliers not lit up. All the furniture in the room has a distinct Baroque style, and there is a 1-meter square fireplace on the living room wall. The firewood inside is making a crackling sound. Even though steam heating pipelines have emerged today, for some wealthy people, they are still accustomed to using ancient things like fireplaces. After all, those dark and huge pipes will destroy the beauty of the building itself. When Dante passed by the living room, he noticed an unfinished blanket on the sofa, and a painting board standing on the ground next to it, with a few simple lines outlined on the canvas. The miscellaneous paint under his feet showed that it was an unfinished oil painting. I believe this should be the place where Avril Lavigne just rested. Is she a painter? Dante thought to himself. With the nervousness of entering an unfamiliar environment in his heart, he followed Joseph to the second floor and stood in front of a leather-wrapped door. Please come in, the captain is waiting for you inside. Joseph turned around with a mysterious smile and gently pushed open the door. Dante adjusted his emotions slightly, nodded, and walked in with some unknown expectation. Meeting again so soon, Mr. Dante. Lion sat behind a huge desk, holding a book with a black cover in his hand, and said without looking up. Please sit down for a while and let me finish reading this paragraph. Can you not be so similar in the opening remarks of your third action team? Dante roused in his heart. He smiled with understanding on his face, walked to the chair in front of the desk, sat down, folded his hands in front of him, and waited quietly. After about 10 minutes, Lion finally lifted his head and shifted his gaze from the book to him. Sorry, I can't bear to stop when I see the highlights. I understand. Dante smiled and took a quick glance, only to find that the title on the cover of the book was Journey to the Deep Sea, a very niche travel diary. Richard Hamilton's book, it is said that he was only 19 years old when he wrote it. The memories in my mind quickly come to mind, and I have a rich knowledge in all aspects except for not doing anything serious in the past. Lion raised his eyebrows upon hearing this, obviously surprised. Mr. Dante is truly a top student of Yellowton, with a wide range of knowledge. You're welcome. Leon chuckled and didn't continue the topic. He closed the book in his hand and placed it on the table, crossed his fingers against his chin, and said. Joseph should have already explained some basic common sense to you, so I won't go into further detail. Next, I will ask you a few questions and hope you will answer them seriously. Because this will largely determine your future destiny. At this moment, Lion's temperament underwent a significant change, no longer like a polite yet distant aristocratic gentleman, but more like a department head with considerable authority. It's like an interview, Dante thought. He unconsciously sat up straight, didn't speak, and nodded. The first question, describe what you felt in the room before. What strange question is this? Dante thought about many possible questions, but never expected it to be this. Fortunately, he had already been mentally prepared before, and after a moment of contemplation, he vaguely replied. A very wonderful feeling, unprecedented, mysterious, and curious. Well, this shouldn't be considered a lie. What was on your mind at that time? I am considering what to do in the future. Lion didn't rush to ask again, but changed his posture and lightly tapped the table with his slender fingers, as if thinking or confirming. What about afterwards? Do you have any answers to the questions you are considering? Dante pondered for a moment, feeling that he needed to be honest on this issue. Yes, my premonition tells me that contacting you is the most correct choice. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Extraordinary System of Special Duties and Gods, Setting Chapter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Extraordinary System of Special Duties and Gods, Setting Chapter. Lion, who received the answer, did not appear surprised. He nodded and continued asking. What kind of actions or rituals did you perform at that time? No. Dante decisively chose to deny. The Taoist techniques one has learned are related to one's greatest secret, and it is absolutely not possible to reveal any information. That is to say, you unintentionally activated your connection with the ether realm, and then the guidance in the dark told you to come find me. Leon pondered for a moment, his fingers paused, and his deep blue eyes calmly looked at the young man in front of him. Dante was staring at these eyes and inexplicably felt a little uneasy in his heart. He bent his left ring finger, pressed his thumb on it, and made a calm and focused hand gesture, which made him feel much better. This small action was not noticed. I think it was like this, because at that time I was very panicked and scared. Sitting there, I couldn't help but daydream until I suddenly felt what you were talking about in the ether realm. God knows what that is. I just recited the pure heart mantra once and made a hexagram, but Ding paused and continued. Then there was a sudden sense of enlightenment, and I called you. Leon nodded as if he had received the final confirmation, and then his gaze became somewhat strange, mixed with various complex emotions such as affirmation, envy, regret, and indeed so on. Dante was a bit confused, and the look in his eyes gave him the feeling of being told by the attending physician that he couldn't live for 3 days after winning 5 million yuan in the lottery. Are you? I've told you before that staying alive by encountering taboos can lead to some extraordinary qualities. Dante nodded, indicating that he was listening attentively. The specific reason Joseph should have told you is that when the human body in the ether realm sense, they naturally have the ability to use the ether, which is extraordinary power. Lion spoke eloquently, like a university professor preaching and teaching. He said, "It sounds good, doesn't it? But in fact, there are many cases of destruction caused by one's extraordinary power losing control every year." What a joke. It doesn't sound like having extraordinary power is actually a good thing. Dante's pupils widened and he was momentarily stunned, somewhat incredulous. This is because there is a limit to the amount of ether energy that the human body can withstand. If one does not gradually develop oneself and blindly uses too much, it will lead to a very frightening outcome. For example, direct death. Dante asked curiously. Direct death is often the luckiest form, but compared to this, being in a state of madness and chaos is the most terrifying form of loss of control. Lion stood up and took out a bottle of red wine from the wine cabinet next to his desk. He opened the cork and poured it into the decanter, then took out 2 tall glasses and placed them on the table. Once out of control occurs, it is destined to be an irreversible process. Imagine a normal person who appears clear and rational, but ends up killing their parents, loved ones, and children with a cruel smile, starting to eat their flesh and blood raw and enjoying it. When Lion said these words, his body leaned forward slightly, and he gazed at Dante, who was somewhat creepy, slowly saying, "Isn't this the most terrifying thing for those around him? Is there any way for Officer Ong there to avoid this situation?" "Yes, the best way is to pray that you will always be an ordinary person in this lifetime." Dante suddenly felt a bit tired. The use of extraordinary power is essentially a resonance with the ether realm, transforming the power of the ether into some supernatural phenomenon. For example, the improvement of speed and strength, the enhancement of spiritual power, and the mastery of elements and materials. For the extraordinary, each person's extraordinary power will manifest into different types of abilities or phenomena, which is common knowledge among all mystical schools. Lion didn't care how cold his cold humor was just now. He curled his lips and continued to tell the story. However, due to the diverse abilities of extraordinary individuals, in order to facilitate differentiation, a widely accepted theory has gradually emerged after intense discussions among scholars throughout history. That's it, special duty. Special duty. Dante felt even more puzzled. Leon nodded and poured the red wine from the decanter into his glass. He picked it up and took a sip, saying, "La Chère red wine, originating from the Toulouse mountains, has a good taste. You can try it." "Thank you, this is high-end goods." Dante politely complimented him, picked up the cup, and started drinking after the other person. The taste is indeed good, but he is more concerned about the topic of extraordinary people at this time. The ability of an extraordinary person to awaken is often related to their past experiences, personality, identity, and even bloodline. Although scholars have not yet reached a consensus on the reasons for this, it does not affect people's better use and mastery of it. For example, Joseph, his current special job is as a fighter because he grew up in a family of boxers, and after sensing the ether realm, his abilities became related to it. For example, the members of the 12 True Gods Church have a unique system of special duties, and if their faith is not devout enough, there is no chance. The 12 true gods have always been recognized as the 12 deities in the Western continent, corresponding to 12 months each. There are many believers in various countries, and Dante is familiar with this. However, the seemingly unsmiling Joseph police officer turned out to be a special duty of a fighter, which looked very different from his image. Whether it's church personnel or other extraordinary individuals, each special position has its own unique promotion system. When the extraordinary constantly comprehends the purest essence of their special duty, their perception of the ether world will become stronger. When they accumulate to a critical value, they will use the formation to advance to the next level, master more extraordinary power, and thus correspond to different titles. Lion shook his red wine glass and slowly pushed open a door to a new world for Dante. What do you mean? For example, if Joseph's current position is a fighter, he may not be in the future. Dante asked curiously. That's right, when he reaches the pinnacle of his understanding of fighters, he can have a stronger sense of the ether world, and then use a specially arranged formation to advance to the next level of combat master, mastering more combat skills and abilities. It's really a plain name. Dante rose in his heart. It seems that the path to promotion for extraordinary individuals is to step by step achieve the ultimate in a certain career system. Thinking of the Taoist techniques he had learned since childhood, he began to think about what this system should be called in this world and how to improve it. So he asked, how do you determine if you have reached the threshold for promotion? Is there a fixed standard? Do you think you can accurately measure the clarity of water? Leon said slowly. Judging by the chromaticity, turbidity, odor, and taste of water quality, generally speaking, the chromaticity of urban drinking water often does not exceed 15 degrees. Dante blurted out without thinking. Lion's mouth slightly opened and he didn't say anything. Dante felt a bit regretful, but upon reflection, the answer seemed somewhat out of line. In this world, there seems to be no evaluation criteria for this aspect yet. Cough, cough. Leon reached out to cover his mouth, coughed lightly, and smiled. It seems that your knowledge reserve is indeed very rich. There is no accurate way to determine the critical value. Since we need to understand the essence, it is naturally impossible to measure it in numerical or standard form. Even though almost every special position has valuable experience left by predecessors, learning it is one thing, and doing it oneself is another. Just like going to school, some people can easily get into the best Yale University in the Federation, while others can only drop out of high school and go home. Lion was a bit teasing, tugging at the corner of his mouth and continuing. So every extraordinary person is constantly accumulating professional insights, mastering more suitable means of using the ether for themselves, in order to better sense the existence of the ether world and obtain promotion opportunities. The methods are different and difficult for others to refer to. The only criterion for judging combat effectiveness is based on how much ether an extraordinary person can reserve or use without losing control. However, due to the differences in each special job system and individual talent, this standard is often not accurate enough. Dante nodded and said. Can that be understood as even an extraordinary person who has been promoted multiple times, due to differences in system and talent, may lose to a new extraordinary person with higher talent and better special job system in battle? In theory, this is how it is said, but this extreme situation usually does not occur. After all, the total amount of ether stored by the extraordinary is there, and there is no such significant difference between systems. After saying these words, Leon seemed to have thought of something and added. However, at lower levels of special positions, there is still a phenomenon of high level losing to lower levels. Dante gradually understood that if the human body were compared to a bucket, the high-level extraordinary would store ether in tons, while the low-level extraordinary would store ether in pounds or ounces. Even if the material of the bucket is different, the total amount placed there remains unchanged, and the range of sensing ether that can be received is also different. What is the highest level of the current special duty system? 9 is the highest level of special abilities that humans can achieve, as recorded in the history of Ethereum. Lion's expression became serious. But this is not actually the end of extraordinary power. Not the endpoint. Dante was stunned, slightly stunned. In Leon's blue eyes, for the first time he didn't appear so calm, he said word by word. The true endpoint is the gods. Gods. Upon hearing this familiar and unfamiliar word, Dante's first thought in his mind was the Taoist Sanqing and all the righteous gods. Immediately, he realized that the divine lineage of this world was completely different from that of earth. He asked, "Are you referring to the 12 righteous gods?" "No, it also includes the evil gods judged by the Orthodox Church, as well as many barbaric gods of primitive tribal beliefs." Dante quickly searched in his memory. During his college years, he chose to take a theology course in order to improve his relationship with a girl from the history department. The textbook mentioned Lyon's concept of evil and barbaric gods. The Western continent has a vast territory, with 10 countries of all sizes scattered throughout, each with different cultural histories. The Heisen Federation, where they were located, became one of the few powerful countries in the Western continent several decades ago due to the success of the institutional revolution. Even so, in some remote areas of the Federation, there are still many primitive tribes who believe in their own gods. The attitude of the federal government toward such religious beliefs has always been ambiguous, belonging to a state where there is neither much interference nor proper justification. The Orthodox Church, which believes in the 12 righteous gods, has always been contemptuous of such small gods, yet it strictly controls them. In the past, many deities believed in by tribes were judged as evil gods, and their areas were also slaughtered under the pretext of showcasing the radiance of the gods. This is known as the Pure God War in the history of this era in the Western continent. The few tribes that escaped unscathed in the war of the past have since labeled their deities as barbaric gods. According to the language on earth, it is a backward and weak branch god. You should know about the history of gods. For ordinary people, it is just a legend and myth stuck in words, but for extraordinary people, it is a fact that has truly existed. Lyon drank the red wine in one gulp and slowly said, "The gods are the high-dimensional beings that truly exist in the ether world, and their dimensions of life have far exceeded the limits and imagination that humans can reach. The extraordinary members of the Church, who firmly believe that the ether power they use comes from the gifts and guidance of the gods, this is also one of the reasons why, despite the rapid development of industry, more and more people still choose to believe in religion. In the eyes of scholars, the power of gods cannot be touched or borrowed, because as a high-dimensional existence, the gods themselves are extremely dangerous. It's not because they hold malice towards humanity, but because their dimensions are too high. Direct contact with any information related to God may lead to madness, let alone the delusion of borrowing God's power." Lyon poured himself another glass and gently shook the tall one. This is not sensationalism. Even the special staff of the Orthodox Church have a mature protection mechanism, and every year, 1/5 of extraordinary people still lose control due to various reasons. Although the Church has always been concealing this fact, almost everyone knows what's going on. So from this point of view, the power of special staff in the church system is essentially no different from that of non-church systems, it's just a difference in presentation form. Dante listened quietly to Lyon's account, thinking about the situation he had sensed while reciting the spell before. The Pure Heart Mantra was originally a prayer to the moral heavenly sovereign in Sanqing, requesting corresponding energy and assistance from the reciter. Did I, by chance, sense a certain deity in this world by reciting incantations? According to Lyon, direct contact with God's messages can have extremely terrifying consequences, but what I clearly feel is a very comfortable and warm power. Can you say in this world, can one actually sense the existence of Sanqing in the Taoist gods? After all, the Taoist priests on earth have never heard of anyone who goes crazy the more they practice, and according to this idea, if the Ethereum is a place where gods exist, can one try to return to Earth in the future through the path of becoming a god? Does this mean that in the future, there is actually a possibility of returning home? He suppressed the excitement in his heart, pondered his words, and asked, can the people of the Church become gods in their promotion system? Lyon shook his head and answered with great certainty, it's impossible. Dante was taken aback for a moment and said, why? Because the dimension of human life cannot accommodate such a majestic and massive ether energy, it will only lead to the most complete loss of control and destruction. Dante, listen, the gods are the endpoint of extraordinary power, but by no means the realm that humans can covet. Even the extraordinary beings of the 9th level that have existed in history can only reach the level of demigods, and this so-called demigod is just an arrogant human, benchmarking against the weakest barbarian god. Lion's blue eyes showed an extremely complex expression, as he stared at the young man in front of him who was in a certain emotion and said solemnly. You must remember that humans may not believe in God, but they cannot be afraid of God, let alone delude themselves into becoming God. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. The Cost of Divination. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. The Cost of Divination. Lion's words echoed in Dante's heart for a long time, with a mixture of anxiety, regret, disappointment, and shock that left him speechless for a moment. Do you know why I told you so much? Lion regained his calm demeanor and his gaze swept over. But Ding shook his head and asked, why? If what I expected is right, your extraordinary ability to awaken should be related to prophecy, divination, and so on. Dante nodded without explanation, as if he had tacitly agreed to this answer. Lion chuckled low and looked at Dante, who was silent. He didn't rush to speak and reached out to gently tug at the bell next to his desk. In the room, there was a strange silence. Dante didn't pay much attention to the changing atmosphere between the two at this moment, his eyebrows furrowed slightly, and he was trying to digest the information he had received. Is the ability to awaken only related to divination? Strictly speaking, the inheritance of one's own sect is not limited to divination alone. The master once said that the 5 meridians of Taoist metaphysics are called mountain medicine, destiny, and prophecy. Each meridian has different characteristics and functions. For example, schools such as Jingyi, Longhu, and Maoshan all choose 1 to 2 meridians as their main cultivation direction, with very few exceptions. Only one's own sect, due to the training of their ancestors, requires each generation of disciples to practice the 5 meridians together, which is extremely demanding of talent requirements. Therefore, they are forced to pass it down from generation to generation, and during this period, they have not cut off their incense and are already blessed by the 3 pure ones. Now it seems that being able to be included in the household back then, with a strong sense of spirituality, is not just an empty and elusive statement, it's just that it may be due to environmental factors on Earth, and I can only learn theory without any practical opportunities. No wonder every time I read the relevant records in the classics of my school in the past, it feels like I'm reading a supernatural novel. After all, becoming immortal, eliminating demons, spiritual therapy, and changing one's destiny are all too suspenseful to listen to. Fortunately, there was a strict demand from the master back then, who had mastered all the knowledge of the 5 meridians of metaphysics with one mind. Now in this world, it seems that all the content I have mastered can no longer be just wishful thinking. Dante pondered for a moment before finally noticing the silent atmosphere. He looked up and asked, which special job system does my ability belong to? This is also the reason why I just confirmed and felt it was a bit complicated. Because the special system of divination is quite unique, Lion explained. Generally speaking, only a few extraordinary individuals in the church will awaken such abilities. Once awakened successfully, their status and identity will undergo a qualitative leap, and only they have the means to minimize the danger factor when conducting divination or prophecy. After all, the power and information sensed during divination are often more chaotic, disorderly, and maddening. So it means that my ability is very dangerous and rare. Dante showed a look of fear appropriately, although he didn't have much of this emotion in his heart at the moment. That feeling is clearly warm and the direction is very clear, right? Yes, if you are a member of the church, you can now be trained as the core strength of the church. Lion nodded and continued, there have been some non-church members who have awakened their abilities before, but only a very small number of them are currently barely living normally. Dante barely caught this word with keen sensitivity. Whether it's divination or prophecy, it has essentially come into contact with the realm of destiny. In the common understanding of all mystical schools, this is a unique ability of God's and one of the few special abilities that humans can reach to the 9th level. The Church has always claimed that they can receive divine guidance because of this. After countless generations of predecessors' hard exploration and cruel lessons, they have summarized a set of methods to avoid danger and loss of control as much as possible, but outsiders have no way of knowing, so for non-church members, awakening this ability basically declares the impending destruction. Lion spoke quietly, and in his gaze, there was a hint of regret mixed with envy at the beginning. Dante gradually realized why he was looking at him like this. According to the understanding of gods in this world, extraordinary beings with divination abilities can be said to be purely seeking death. But this ability is unique, after all. Not everyone has the opportunity to come into contact with the realm exclusive to God, so it naturally makes people envious. To give an inappropriate example, a pile of dog poop mixed with poison is placed there. Everyone knows that eating it gives them a chance to become rich overnight, but not everyone has the courage to take it all in one bite. So the very few people you mentioned, by using certain ancient relics available for use, one can forcibly maintain consciousness, but ultimately it is still in a semi-insane state, only delaying the time of losing control as much as possible, just like drinking the venom of the Corinthian lizard to quench thirst. Ancient relics should be items similar to taboos. Dante silently memorized this word. Is there no extraordinary person who regains faith after awakening his divination ability? From the records, it seems that there is none. Leon threw the answer directly and took out a brown paper file bag from the desk drawer, throwing it on the table. I am also surprised that you have awakened this ability, after all, from our investigation into you. He pointed to the file on the table and turned his head, saying, your past experiences and family background have no record of any faith in gods. Dante looked in the direction of Leon's finger and found that the file bag had written. The Truth Faction Case, 2.01. Survivor. Dante Ashborne, what does 2 in this number mean? Dante's thinking skipped a bit. So, either you are a deeply hidden believer and have never exposed this in the past 20 years, or I can only attribute you to those unlucky ones. Lion's blue eyes once again appeared calm and profound, and his voice was low as he continued, but even if it's the former, you probably won't get better. What does it mean? Dante frowned. He was indeed extremely hidden, and naturally believed in Taoism as well. Believers of the 12 righteous gods will not hide their religious beliefs, they wish the whole continent knew about it. Lion tugged at the corner of his mouth and looked straight at the man in front of him. Unless you believe in an evil god. Evil gods. What a joke. How could my Taoist Sanqing and all the righteous gods be evil gods? Dante almost got up on the table and immediately realized that this was not Earth. Can't I really get it right? Lion's observation is very keen, but his attitude doesn't seem to care too much. Relax, I hope you're really a cult believer. Is it an official federal agency that is not actually on the same line as the Church? In that case, by arresting you and bringing you to justice, our action team's target for this month can be achieved ahead of schedule. Dante remained silent for a moment and said very seriously. I swear, I have never believed in any deity on the mainland. As a law-abiding citizen of the Federation, I am at odds with evil gods. End of this chapter.